Let's hit rewind this week and take a quick listen to some moments from some of my favorite episodes from the first quarter of the year. This episode features great moments from John Walter, Ian Storm, Chris Gillen, Neal Woodson, Afshan Kinder, Mike Kendall, and Beth Karawan. Let's get to it.
Welcome to Next in Queue, the podcast for contact center and customer experience professionals. Next in Queue is brought to you by Happy 2 Vision. Eliminate blind spots and see right through every conversation with Happy 2 Vision. Learn more at happitu.com. Now, here's your host, Rob Dwyer.
What are some of the things that companies need to be thinking about when they either know or suspect that the voice on the other end of a call or a request on the other end, because it could be a chat request, is not a human, but is instead a proxy?
Yeah, most companies have a policy of not dealing with proxies. They want to talk to the customer, which is reasonable for security and fraud purposes. But when you're dealing with subscription management, the Federal Trade Commission in various states will come down with a hammer if you make it more difficult to cancel a subscription than it is to subscribe. And so what happens is the consumers are actually entering into agency agreements with companies like BillShark, Rocket Money, Experian, and a few others, which makes the consumer a principal and these companies the agent. It's in the terms of service. This is how they set it up. So the legal rights, the state and federal legal rights that your consumer has, and the terms and conditions that you've entered into with your consumers, so it's the contractual rights that your customer has, they are bestowed upon this agent, so that the agent becomes an extension of the consumer. This hasn't been tested by the courts yet. This is a very novel issue. But the way I interpret the regulations and how things have unfolded so far in cases that deal with making subscription unnecessarily difficult, when you deny a proxy, it's tantamount to denying a consumer their request to cancel. And if you're a large brand that is doing this at scale, it can become problematic. Another interesting angle that we should talk about is that a lot of companies don't know they're dealing with proxies. I've talked because what I'm building is kind of like a network effect where I need to have call centers on one side that are aware of this problem and want to take proactive measures to just have best practices and have efficiency and transparency in their operations. But there's also, on the proxy side, I've been building relationships, and they kind of have raise the veil a little bit. And there are some of them that are actively impersonating consumers, and and this happens most for companies that are receiving all types of requests, not just cancellation, but receiving requests by email. There are certain apps now that kind of hijack the user's email, and then they send messages to companies from the customer's email address. That's very interesting. There's other instances, if you allow cancellation to occur through a chatbot, then with just providing basic information. I know one company that they allow cancellations through a chatbot, and the only authenticating credential they require is their customer's email, which I find very intriguing. You're getting, if you allow cancellations through chatbots, you're getting cancellation requests from these proxies and on behalf of your customers through your chatbot. And it even happens over the phone too. Even sometimes it's humans calling. So some of these proxies, if they're unable to find a more efficient method, they have their own call centers, which will call you and will, in some cases, impersonate your customers. In other cases, if it's a large volume, they'll say, "Hey, I'm so and so from this company, and I've got 350 people to cancel today." And the agent on the other side is like, "Oh my gosh, that happens. It happens.
There goes my handle time."
There goes the handle time. It happens for some large companies that have a high customer churn and where this is a big issue. But what's interesting is through all of history, companies and consumers have had bilateral communication. So a customer states their intent, but the company has an opportunity to kind of curate that experience and communicate back to the customer. But in this environment where a consumer is delegating a task to a third party, whether it's AI or human, and the company doesn't know that it's a proxy communicating with them, the company has effectively lost control of the customer experience. And I think that's a big deal personally. I personally think it's a very big deal, especially when it comes to something like save offers. Like if you're trying to retain your customers, is it the same if you have a customer who's calling in trying to cancel as compared to a consumer who's like just like going through an app and going click, 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 cancel like 5 different subscriptions all at once, just because they're trying to meet their budgeting goals on a fintech app? You know, there's a lot that's lost when a company is just allowing, you know, anybody who has the authenticating information to process cancellations. And so what we do is provide a secure channel where we help the contact centers help set up healthy boundaries with the proxies. So we help equip them, say, hey, you know, here's the kind of the legal landscape you're in, you know, when you receive these requests, and here are some proactive measures you can take just by some simple modifications to your terms of service to kind of just clean up shop and make sure that you're like well protected in this new environment. It allows you to set healthy boundaries with proxies. And then once you do this, you let the proxies know, hey, we have an approved channel for receiving these requests. And ProxyLink which is the company I've set up, aims to be just extremely efficient and fair and enjoyable to everyone involved in this transaction. So we just want to make it easy for the proxy to upload requests by hitting an API rather than having to make a phone call. And then we make it easy for the call center, for at no cost, totally free, can just use our manual tools, which is just a dashboard we can log into and manually resolve these requests. Or we're working on a premium version to fully integrate and automate these for contact centers.
I think if I may go way back to justify the student loans I'm still paying on a psychology degree I don't use. Sit with me a second here. The word is relatedness. Meaning you feel like you're a part of something bigger than yourself and you're included. You can do that without being a blind cult follower where it's like, all right, if I need to die to serve, that's what I do, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like, you know, for the contact center, like, yeah, that'd be kind of a weird vibe to have. But what are those low touches to make people feel involved? Like for us at Aspect, we have a Slack channel where I screwed off with the CEO for like an hour talking about AI and all the cool stuff he's doing with his journal and stuff when he uploads the documents. And we were playing around with it. There was a couple of us employees where we're like, because basically he trained the model to be similar to himself, and that's what he's working on for fun. He's like, yeah, ask virtual me anything, right? Or we have Slack channels where it's you know, this was a new hire, right? Talk about those people that you take a chance on that maybe don't quite fit what you're looking for. She came from the customer side. She brought all these fun games that are like, you know, Wordle-esque, like same flavor, right? You do it once a day, it's fun, you share your score. But it's all those little touches where all of a sudden, before you know it, going back to the personal health thing, 10,000 steps a day, there's no Rocky Balboa training montage for that. But I bet if we all did it every dang day, you'd look back after a month and be like, oh my God, I'm actually going further. I'm not sweating as much. I don't hurt. Right? But it's like, it's hard to bring that awareness. And I think that's where the engagement piece from a technology standpoint really comes, where it's that gentle touch of awareness, but you're still having the human do it. Like, what bothers me about the AI thing is we're picturing robots replacing humans. And to me, the analogy is, as a Marvel dork, it's Tony Stark stepping into the armor. Who, you know, you have this machine, this AI that's making you aware of the conditions around you, but it's empowering you to work on your instincts faster. to really
Mm,
just clear the air, to reduce the cognitive load of, that's weird. Why is there a hole opening where aliens come out, right?
That is weird. When we help people, what does that do physiologically for us?
Well, and please don't. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a psychologist. I'm none of that. I'm just a traveling salesman who just tried to learn more. I always tell people I'm kind of John the Baptist out there trying to preach the word. But what I found was that probably the biggest thing is when we are helpful to others, we get this little chemical cocktail of various hormones and things that we just get a little of that. And it makes us feel really good. And what's even more interesting is it doesn't just happen for the giver, it happens for the receiver. They get a little hit. And to make it even better, when people see it or hear about it, they get a little hit. And in fact, if you go to a movie and you see somebody in a movie do something really kind, you ever notice how you feel kind of warm and really good? There you go. It's Mother Nature's kind of push. It's a shove saying this is the way it ought to be. Do this and you'll feel good. You'll be happier. And there's some research being done that says that we are actually happier when we are serving others, when we do things for others. That's what makes us truly happy. On the other side of it is the health piece. And I found this really interesting. There's a lot of research that's been done that people that are helpful to others typically have lower blood pressure, less heart disease, lower rates of depression, and even live longer on average. And I found this really interesting is that when a doctor gives like 40 seconds of compassionate speech to a patient, like, turns to a patient and says, I'm here with you. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to do my best to make sure nothing bad happens here. That those patients actually heal faster. Because what happens, that little chemical hit that makes us feel good also suppresses the stress hormone cortisol. And we all know what stress does. Stress is bad for our health. Over the long term, it's good. It's good in the short term. I mean, we need it in the short term. I mean, saber-toothed tiger is running after you. Yeah, you want cortisol. You want some stress. You want to take off and run, right?
Right.
But living on that is really bad for us. And what we have set up in our society is almost living on that constantly. We are bombarded with cortisol, worried about our jobs, worried about this, worried about that, scared, we're in competition. I got to win. I got to beat the guy next to me. All that does is it stresses us out and we get sick. And the antidote to all of that, just let's stop it and be helpful.
What's the first big challenge organizations have when they bring someone into that role?
Well, we always say, it's Friday, I'm an agent, then we sprinkle this magic fairy dust on us over the weekend. We pop up as a team leader.
Hooray!
I'm ready to go. I'm so excited. And then you turn around, what am I supposed to be doing yet? And so I think one is, clear expectations, not about the 50 things that they need to do, but the top 3 things that they must be doing, right? And it's so interesting to see because when we go into organizations, that's the first thing we do is where are you spending your time? Because where you spend your time determines the outcomes you're going to get, right? And a lot of time is spent in administration, fighting fires, because there's questions from, their team, there's escalations, there's lots of firefighting in contact centers, and it will always have some firefighting, but you can minimize it. But very little time in planning, what your month is going to be, the results that you want to achieve, and and strategically, how are you going to do that with your team? It's a lot of reactive and very little proactive. So the first thing I would say is we need to flip that. We need to put at least a third of our time into making sure we're proactive and making sure that, we're spending time with our people. And especially in remote environments, I was reading an article recently about how some companies are upping their monitoring because they're concerned with productivity. And it's really not monitoring, it's connecting with people, building the culture with them. And in a way, they will then not disappoint you. You know what? Like, if you don't have that connection, then it becomes very sterile and everybody for themselves. But when you have the connection, then you feel for the other person to say, well, I'm going to do this because I know Rob's counting on me, you know?
Yeah.
So I think it's a little bit different. So the first one is being clear as to what is expected of you and making sure you have time to do those things.
I think the thing that gets lost sometimes in VOC programs is that it's all about the survey, and maybe if you take the next step, it's all about the data you can glean from your product. If you're a software product, you should be able to instrument that thing and figure out when people are on the happy path or the sad path. But I think that the qualitative insights are equally as important and sometimes more powerful than the quantitative. And finding a way to integrate both of those to create insights is super important. And that was something that we did really well at Intuit. We had this DNA from our founder coming out of Procter and Gamble called Follow Me Homes, where we'd literally go to people's houses or their businesses and watch them use our product and talk to them and get to the level of empathy or emotion behind it. And I remember one of the tools we used was a sort of a photo journal, if you will, survey. We would send out a questionnaire and say, don't answer it with words or numbers, just upload a picture to answer it. And then we would go talk to the customer afterwards. And I remember one of the situations where we had a CPA and the question was, what does our software mean to your business? And the picture he uploaded was in his living room, and it was a little pop-up tent with his two cute little daughters and wife in sleeping bags in there. And so we're sitting there in a room with the product managers and the engineers, and we're all scratching our head like, what does that have to do with our software? And so we get the guy on the phone and we talked to him and said, tell us about this photo. What does this mean? And he said, well, your software is critical for my business success. If it has a glitch, if the calculations are wrong, takes too long, my business could fail, and my business supports my family, and my family is the most important thing in my life. And that's why your software is critical to me having a happy life. And, we're trying to brush tears away and just getting inside the head of a customer where if we had just sent a survey, we would have never got that. And so if I can take that emotional connection to the customer and understanding of their needs, marry it up with the data that I'm getting from my analytics, and then put those two together and have a strategy about how I'm going to deliver for those customers, that's way more impactful than just sort of hashing through my data and making sort of educated guesses or maybe AI guesses about what the best thing to do next is.
Tell me about donuts. What is with the donuts?
So in 2021, every weekend for that year, I made donuts for a local cafe. That was one of my many, I call it my pandemic-induced professional sabbatical. I lost my job at the beginning of my corporate job at the beginning of the pandemic, and I took it as an opportunity to try out a lot of different stuff. And one of the things was I went back into the restaurant industry, and one thing led to another, and the owners of the restaurant that I was working at said, we're going to reopen our cafe. It was just for breakfast and lunch. We want to do something different for the town. We want to make donuts. And I was like, that sounds great. And they said, we want you to do them. And I said, that's awesome, but I've never made a donut before in my life. I've baked other things. I used to have a baking side gig when my kids were younger. They're like, you'll figure it out. And literally handed me the keys. And I made donuts every weekend for a year. So if anybody remembers the Time to Make the Donuts guy from TV, that was me, like including like wearing like all white baker's gear, covered head to toe in flour, getting up really early in the morning. And so that was how the donuts started. And then just on a Friday afternoon, I was having writer's block, and I was trying to think of something to write. And I did it as a goof. Like, I really it was like, it's Friday, let's talk about donuts. You know what making donuts taught me? It was one of the best employee experiences I ever had. And I explained why. And to my absolute shock, people were like, that's a great story. I didn't know that about you. Tell us more. And that's turned into It's Donut Friday.
Next in Queue is brought to you by Happy To and is produced by me, Rob Dwyer. If you enjoy this podcast, please by all means subscribe and or rate this podcast in iTunes or your favorite podcast app. But more importantly, please tell just one person about this podcast. Word of mouth is the best way for people to discover new content. As always, thanks for listening.